The great hall buzzed with alien voices as warriors from across the galaxy gathered for the annual military showcase. Commander Thys adjusted his ceremonial armor and looked around with barely hidden disgust. Representatives from dozens of species filled the enormous chamber, each more pathetic than the last in his opinion. Thys belonged to the reptilian dominion, and his people had conquered 17 star systems through pure strength and superior tactics. His scaled hide bore scars from countless battles, and his razor-sharp claws had ended more lives than he could count. The other species here today would learn what real warriors looked like. Ambassador Krill, an insectoid creature with compound eyes and clicking mandibles, called for attention. The noise died down as hundreds of beings turned toward the central platform. Thys rolled his yellow eyes. The Galactic Council insisted on these peaceful demonstrations, as if warfare could be understood through presentations and speeches. Today we honor the military traditions of all member species, Krill announced in the Universal Translator's flat tone. Each delegation will demonstrate their combat capabilities and tactical doctrines. The Ursine Coalition went first. Massive bear-like creatures showed off their incredible strength by crushing metal bars and lifting enormous weights. Their roars shook the chamber walls. Thys nodded with approval. At least these beings understood that power mattered in war. Next came the avian fleet. Bird-like warriors with hollow bones and keen eyesight displayed their aerial maneuvers using hover platforms. They moved with grace and speed that impressed even Thys. Their talons gleamed as they performed mock attacks from above. Several other species followed. The Aquatic Confederation showed videos of underwater combat techniques. The Silicon Collective demonstrated how their rock-hard bodies could withstand incredible damage. Each display reinforced what Thys already knew. Successful warriors needed natural advantages like size, speed, armor, or weapons. Then the humans stepped forward. Thys almost laughed out loud. The human representative was tiny compared to most beings in the hall. Captain Reed stood barely 2 meters tall, with soft pink skin and no visible natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no armor plating, no toxin glands. His arms looked weak and his legs seemed built for nothing more dangerous than walking. The human military philosophy centers on adaptability and cooperation, Reed began in a calm voice. Thys snorted loudly enough for nearby delegates to hear. Cooperation in war? The very idea was absurd. Reed continued his presentation, showing images of human soldiers in various environments. Desert warfare, jungle combat, urban fighting, space operations. The humans looked even more pathetic in their bulky armor and helmets. They needed artificial protection because their bodies were so weak. Our greatest strength lies in our ability to work together and adapt to any situation, Reed explained. We study our enemies, learn from our mistakes, and modify our tactics as needed. This time Thys did laugh, a harsh sound that echoed across the hall. Adaptation is what prey does when it runs from predators, he called out. Several other delegates turned to look at him. Real warriors crush their enemies with overwhelming force. Reed's expression remained neutral. Perhaps, Commander Thys, different species have different approaches to conflict. Different approaches? Thys stood up, his full 3-meter height towering over the nearby seats. There is only one approach that matters, strength. Your species looks like it could barely handle a single one of my warriors. Murmurs spread through the hall. Some delegates seemed uncomfortable with the direct challenge, but others leaned forward with interest. Military showcases rarely involved actual confrontation between species. Human soldiers train constantly to overcome physical limitations, Reed replied diplomatically. We have learned that the mind can be more powerful than the body in many situations. Thys gestured dismissively with one clawed hand. Pretty words. But when real fighting starts, only strength matters. Your soldiers would break and run at the first sign of real danger. We prefer to avoid unnecessary conflicts, Reed said. But when fighting becomes necessary, humans can be quite determined. Determined? Thys looked around the hall, making sure he had everyone's attention. I have seen your species' combat records. You fight among yourselves constantly. No unity, no discipline. How can warriors who cannot even agree with each other hope to stand against a coordinated military force? Reed paused for a moment, and Thys thought he saw something flicker across the human's face. But it passed so quickly he might have imagined it. Human diversity can be challenging, Reed admitted, but it also provides unique advantages in warfare. We can think in ways that more uniform species might not anticipate. Thys shook his head in amazement. Even when challenged directly, this human made excuses instead of showing proper warrior spirit. No wonder their species remained confined to such a small corner of the galaxy. Diversity is weakness, Thais declared. My Serpent Guard units think as one mind, strike as one weapon. We have never lost a battle because we understand that war requires absolute unity and unquestioned obedience. Those are certainly effective approaches, Reed acknowledged. But there are others. The diplomatic response irritated Thys even more. A real warrior would have responded to insults with action, not more polite words. This human showed no pride, no fighting spirit, no killer instinct. Everything that made a true warrior was missing. Ambassador Krill tried to restore order to the presentation, but Thys was not finished. Tell me, Captain Reed, what happens when your soldiers face enemies who are faster, stronger, and better armed? What happens when your adaptability meets overwhelming superiority? Reed looked directly at Thys for the first time. Something in the human's eyes made the reptilian commander pause, but only for a moment. I suppose we would find out, Reed said quietly. Yes, you would, Thys agreed with satisfaction, and it would not take long. The presentation continued with other species, but Thys paid little attention. He had seen enough. Humans talked about cooperation and adaptation, but those were just fancy words for weakness and desperation. When real fighting began, such concepts would crumble before disciplined strength. As the showcase ended and delegates began to leave, Thys noticed Reed packing up his materials. The human worked methodically, showing no sign of anger or embarrassment despite the public humiliation. This only confirmed Thys's opinion. A true warrior would have challenged him to combat or at least shown some fighting spirit. Ambassador Krill approached Thys as he prepared to leave. Commander, tomorrow we begin the practical evaluations. All species will participate in combat simulations to test their military capabilities. Thys's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Excellent. My Serpent Guard will demonstrate what real warriors can accomplish. The humans have also volunteered to participate, Krill added. Even better, Thys replied. Perhaps Captain Reed will learn the difference between theory and practice. As he left the hall, Thys was already planning how to make the humans' defeat as educational as possible for the other delegates. Tomorrow would prove once and for all which species deserved respect in military matters. Simulation pods hummed with energy as the combat facility prepared for the first round of military evaluations. Thys inspected his gear one final time, running his claws along the edge of his ceremonial blade. Today would be glorious. The facility could recreate any battlefield condition imaginable. Desert storms, Arctic blizzards, dense jungles, urban environments, even zero-gravity combat. Each simulation felt completely real to the participants, though safety protocols prevented actual death or permanent injury. Thys watched through the observation windows as other species prepared their forces. The Ursine Coalition had brought 12 massive warriors, each one capable of tearing through metal with bare claws. The avian fleet selected their fastest pilots and sharpest scouts. Even the usually peaceful Aquatic Confederation had assembled a team of their finest underwater specialists. Then he saw the human squad. Thys had expected Captain Reed to lead the human forces personally, but instead a gruff-looking man named Sergeant Cross commanded 8 ordinary soldiers. They looked even more unimpressive up close. Average height, average build, carrying standard energy weapons that any species could purchase. Nothing special about any of them. Is this truly the best your species can offer? Thys asked Reed, who stood nearby observing the preparations. They are good soldiers, Reed replied simply. Good soldiers? Thys repeated mockingly. My Serpent Guard have trained since childhood for war. Each one has killed dozens of enemies in real combat. These humans look like civilians playing dress-up. Reed said nothing, but Thys noticed the humans' attention focused entirely on the tactical displays showing the first simulation environment. A mountainous region with limited visibility and multiple choke points. Perfect terrain for demonstrating superior tactics and coordination. Ambassador Krill announced the rules over the facility's communication system. Each team would be given identical objectives in the same environment. Performance would be measured by speed of completion, casualties sustained, and tactical innovation. Simple enough. The first simulation began with the Ursine Coalition. Thys watched with appreciation as the massive bear warriors charged straight through enemy positions. Their thick hides absorbed weapon fire that would have dropped smaller beings, and their raw strength allowed them to crush obstacles that might stop other forces. They completed their objectives in under 30 minutes with minimal casualties. The avian fleet took a different approach. Their bird-like warriors used superior mobility to outflank enemy positions and strike from unexpected angles. Their keen eyesight spotted threats long before other species would notice them. They finished in 28 minutes. When Theis's serpent guard entered the simulation, he felt a surge of pride. His warriors moved like a single organism, each one knowing exactly where the others would be at any moment. They used advanced tactics and overwhelming firepower to systematically eliminate all resistance. The enemy never had a chance to mount an effective defense. 19 minutes, 0 casualties. Now that, Theis announced to the observation deck, is how real warriors fight. Several alien delegates nodded in agreement. The Serpent Guard performance had been flawless, a perfect demonstration of military superiority. Then it was the humans' turn. Theis settled back to enjoy the show. This would be embarrassing for the humans, but perhaps they would learn something useful before inevitably failing. Sergeant Cross led his squad into the simulation environment. Almost immediately, things went wrong from Theis's perspective. Instead of advancing toward their objectives like proper warriors, the humans spread out and began retreating to defensive positions. "What are they doing?" demanded the Ursine representative. "They are running away before the fighting even begins." Theis shook his head in disgust. "Cowardice. I warned you this would happen." But Reed remained silent, watching the tactical display with intense concentration. The human squad continued their strange behavior. When enemy forces appeared, instead of meeting them in glorious combat, the humans fell back further. They used the terrain to break line of sight, then disappeared entirely from the enemy's sensors. "Where did they go?" Ambassador Krill asked in confusion. For several minutes, nothing happened. Enemy forces advanced through the mountains, searching for targets that seemed to have vanished completely. Theis grew impatient. Were the humans hiding like frightened children? Then the ambush began. Enemy positions started exploding from within. Communications went down. Supply lines were cut. Command posts were destroyed by attackers who appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and disappeared again before reinforcements could respond. The humans had somehow infiltrated behind enemy lines without being detected. They were dismantling the entire enemy force from the inside out, turning the simulation into chaos and confusion. How did they get past the perimeter? The avian representative wondered aloud. Theis frowned as he studied the tactical replay. The humans had used terrain features that other species had ignored. Narrow crevices too small for larger warriors, unstable rock formations that would not support heavier beings, even what appeared to be deliberate rock slides to mask their movement. The enemy forces in the simulation began to panic. They could not find targets to fight, could not establish secure positions, could not even maintain basic communications. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking from impossible angles and vanishing before counterattacks could be organized. "This is not how warriors fight," Theis muttered. "This is sneaking around like scavengers." But he could not argue with the results. The human squad completed all objectives in just 15 minutes, suffering 0 casualties while completely destroying enemy morale and combat effectiveness. When Sergeant Cross and his team emerged from the simulation, they looked calm and professional. No celebration, no boasting, just quiet satisfaction at a job well done. "Impressive tactics," Ambassador Krill announced to the observation deck. The human approach was quite different from other species. "Different," Theis agreed coldly, "but not honorable. Real warriors face their enemies openly, not skulk around in shadows." The simulation measured effectiveness, not honor, Reed pointed out. Different objectives might require different methods. Theis waved a dismissive claw. "Any coward can hide and strike from ambush. Let us see how your soldiers perform when forced to fight properly." The next simulation would be urban combat, with limited terrain to exploit and multiple objectives requiring direct assault. Theis was confident that human trickery would fail when confronted with the need for straightforward military action. But as the preparation began for round 2, Theis noticed something that bothered him. The human soldiers were studying footage of every other species' performance with intense focus. They seemed to be analyzing strengths, weaknesses, and tactical preferences of their competitors. "Planning your next retreat?" Theis asked Sergeant Cross directly. The human looked at him with steady eyes. "Planning to adapt, Commander. That is what we do. Thais snorted in derision, but something about the human's quiet confidence troubled him. No warrior should be that calm after barely surviving their first engagement through cowardly tactics. Still, the next simulation would prove everything. Urban warfare required courage, strength, and direct confrontation, all the things humans clearly lacked. Whatever tricks they had used in the mountains would not work in the open streets of a city. Multiple simulation environments rotated through the facility as the combat evaluations continued throughout the day. Thais watched each scenario with growing confusion as human tactics shifted dramatically between different challenges. In the urban warfare simulation, Sergeant Cross's squad abandoned their mountain ambush tactics completely. Instead, they moved through the simulated city like ghosts, using building layouts and civilian populations as cover. When the Ursine Coalition relied on brute force to smash through walls, humans slipped through windows and service tunnels. When the avian fleet used rooftop positions for overwatch, humans operated from basements and underground passages. They fight differently against each species, observed the aquatic representative during a break between simulations. Against our forces, they used flooding tactics and amphibious approaches we had never seen before. Thais had noticed the same pattern. When facing the Silicon Collective's rock-hard warriors, humans had somehow introduced sonic weapons that disrupted crystalline structures. Against the insectoid swarms, they used wide-area energy bursts and environmental modifications that countered numerical advantages. They are studying us, Thys realized with growing unease, learning our methods and developing counters. Is that not what any intelligent military force would do? Captain Reed asked. He had been observing each engagement with the same calm attention, occasionally making notes on a small device. Intelligent forces rely on superior training and equipment, Thys replied, not constant changes in doctrine. Different tools for different problems, Reed said simply. The next simulation environment materialized around them. A dense jungle with limited visibility, dangerous wildlife, and unpredictable weather patterns. Thys smiled grimly. His serpent guard excelled in natural environments where their enhanced senses and natural camouflage provided significant advantages. The Ursine Coalition struggled in the thick vegetation. Their massive size worked against them as they crashed through undergrowth that smaller species could navigate silently. The avian fleet found their aerial advantages negated by the dense canopy overhead. Even the Silicon Collective's durability meant little when quicksand and unstable terrain could trap their heavy forms. Thys's serpent guard moved through the jungle like they were born there. Their scaled skin blended with shadows, their forked tongues tasted chemical traces in the air, and their cold-blooded metabolism required minimal resources. They completed their objectives efficiently while avoiding most of the environmental hazards entirely. Then the humans entered the same jungle. Thys expected them to struggle even more than the other species. Humans had no natural camouflage, poor night vision, and soft skin that would be vulnerable to poisonous plants and dangerous insects. They should have been helpless in such an environment. Instead, they adapted again. The human squad split into smaller units, each one moving through the jungle using completely different techniques. Some traveled through the canopy like the avian fleet, despite lacking wings or natural climbing abilities. Others moved along the jungle floor, somehow avoiding detection by wildlife that had spotted every other species immediately. How are they doing that? Ambassador Krill asked in amazement. Thys studied the tactical displays more carefully. The humans were using tools and techniques that seemed impossible. Artificial scent maskers to confuse predators, modified equipment that allowed tree-to-tree movement, even what appeared to be communication with some jungle animals. They are cheating somehow, Thys declared. No species can adapt that quickly to an environment they have never encountered. The simulation is monitored for violations, Reed pointed out. All equipment and techniques used by human forces are within established parameters. But Thys could not understand how humans kept finding solutions to problems that stopped other species completely. In the Arctic simulation, they had somehow generated enough body heat to operate effectively despite their lack of natural insulation. In the zero-gravity environment, they had moved with a grace that rivaled species who lived their entire lives in space. The jungle simulation ended with humans achieving their objectives faster than any other species, including Thys's own serpent guard. This was becoming deeply troubling. Your soldiers seem remarkably adaptable, the Silicon Collective. Representative commented to Reed during the next break. Humans are generalists, Reed explained. We evolved on a world with many different environments and challenges. Adaptation is what we do best. Thice overheard the conversation and approached angrily. Adaptation is not a military virtue. Discipline is. Training is. Overwhelming force is. Your soldiers show no consistency in their methods. Consistency can be predictable, Reed replied. Predictability can be exploited. Strength cannot be exploited, Thice shot back. When my warriors face yours, there will be no terrain tricks or environmental factors to hide behind. Pure combat capability will determine the victor. Reed looked at him thoughtfully. Is that a challenge, Commander? The observation deck fell silent. Other delegates turned to watch the exchange between the two military leaders. Thice felt the weight of their attention and realized he had painted himself into a corner. If the Council permits, Thice said formally, I would welcome the opportunity to demonstrate proper military tactics against your forces. Ambassador Krill's compound eyes swiveled between the two commanders. The evaluation protocols do allow for direct species versus species combat scenarios. If both parties agree, my soldiers are ready, Sergeant Cross interrupted. He had approached while Thice was speaking and now stood beside Reed with calm confidence. Excellent, Thice replied. His Serpent Guard were eager for a real challenge after these simple simulations. Perhaps we can settle this question of military superiority once and for all. What environment would you prefer? Reed asked politely. Thice considered carefully. The humans had shown strange abilities to exploit terrain features and environmental conditions. Better to choose something neutral that would favor neither side. A standard military engagement zone, Thice decided. Flat terrain, minimal cover, direct confrontation between forces. No tricks, no hiding, just warrior against warrior. That sounds fair, Reed agreed. As the simulation facility prepared for the direct confrontation, Thice felt his confidence returning. On equal ground with equal numbers, his Serpent Guard's superior training and natural advantages would prove decisive. The humans had shown cleverness in exploiting weaknesses, but they would find no weaknesses to exploit in a straightforward battle. You should prepare your soldiers for defeat, Thice told Sergeant Cross as they prepared to enter the simulation. Perhaps they will learn something useful about real warfare. Cross looked at him with an expression Thice could not quite read. We will do our best, Commander. Something about the human's tone bothered Thice, but he dismissed the feeling. Tomorrow would end all questions about which species produced better warriors. The Serpent Guard had never lost a direct engagement, and they would not start today. But as he watched the human soldiers prepare their equipment with calm professionalism, Thice felt a nagging doubt. These humans had surprised him repeatedly with their adaptability and unexpected solutions. What if they had been holding back somehow? What if their true capabilities remained hidden? Thice shook his head angrily. Such thoughts were weakness. His warriors were superior in every measurable way. No amount of human cleverness could overcome that fundamental reality. Still, as the simulation chamber sealed and the battle environment materialized around them, Thice found himself wondering what other surprises the humans might have prepared. Warning lights flashed red as the simulation environment shifted to something none of the participants had expected. Instead of the flat battlefield Thice had requested, they found themselves in a nightmarish survival scenario that would test every species beyond their limits. The facility's speakers crackled with Ambassador Krill's urgent voice. All teams, we are implementing an emergency protocol. This will be a comprehensive survival evaluation under extreme conditions. You must complete objectives while managing limited resources, hostile environment, and survival needs. Thice looked around in dismay. The environment was a desolate wasteland with toxic atmosphere, extreme temperature variations, and scarce resources. Worse, the simulation had scattered all participants randomly across a vast area, forcing species to survive independently while working toward common goals. His Serpent Guard were tough and disciplined, but this was not the glorious battle he had planned. This was about endurance, resource management, and adapting to conditions that favored no one. Within hours, the evaluation became a desperate struggle for survival. The toxic atmosphere required constant use of breathing equipment, draining power reserves rapidly. The temperature swung from burning heat during the day to freezing cold at night. Food and water were almost impossible to find. Thais watched the tactical displays from his environmental suit as various species began to falter. The Ursine Coalition's massive warriors required enormous amounts of food and water, resources that simply were not available. The avian fleet's hollow bones made them vulnerable to the temperature extremes. Even his own serpent guard struggled with equipment failures and dwindling supplies. Then something unprecedented happened. Human voices began appearing on the emergency communication channels, reaching out to teams from other species. Sergeant Cross's squad was offering medical assistance to wounded avian warriors. Another human team shared water purification equipment with struggling Ursine forces. A third group provided technical support to help Silicon Collective units repair damaged life support systems. "What are they doing?" Thys demanded over the command frequency. "This is a competition, not a cooperation exercise." "Sir," one of his Serpent Guard reported, "Human Team 3 is approaching our position. They are requesting permission to assist with our equipment problems." Thys nearly refused out of principle, but the reality was that his warriors were in serious trouble. 2 Serpent Guard were suffering from suit malfunctions, and their medical supplies were running dangerously low. "What do they want in return?" Thys asked suspiciously. "Nothing, sir. They say they have spare medical supplies and technical expertise." This made no sense. In any military evaluation, helping competitors was foolish at best and treasonous at worst. Yet the humans seemed determined to assist anyone who needed help, regardless of species or previous conflicts. Against his better judgment, Thys allowed the human team to approach. 2 human soldiers arrived at his position carrying equipment packs that looked far heavier than humans should have been able to manage in the harsh environment. "Commander Thys?" one of them asked politely. "We understand you have wounded soldiers who need medical attention. Why would you help us?" Thys demanded. "We are competitors in this evaluation." The human removed her helmet, revealing a young woman with determined eyes. "Because they are hurt, sir. Politics can wait until everyone is safe." Thys watched in amazement as the humans worked on his injured warriors with skill and efficiency that matched his own medical specialists. They used advanced techniques and equipment that seemed beyond what their species should possess. More importantly, they shared their precious resources without hesitation or negotiation. "Your people have medical training?" Thys asked the woman. "All our soldiers cross-train in multiple specialties," she replied while treating a Serpent Guard's radiation poisoning. "We never know what skills will be needed in any given situation." As the humans worked, Thys monitored communications from across the evaluation zone. The same scene was playing out everywhere. Human teams were providing assistance, sharing resources, and helping other species survive conditions that were defeating even the strongest warriors. But something else was happening that disturbed Thys even more. The species receiving human assistance began working together in ways that had never been seen before. Ursine warriors started sharing their remaining food with struggling avian scouts. Silicon Collective units used their durability to shield other species from environmental hazards. Insectoid swarms coordinated with aquatic forces to establish supply lines. "They are uniting the competition against us," Thys realized with growing alarm. But that was not quite right either. The humans were not positioning themselves as leaders or trying to control the growing cooperation. Instead, they seemed to be facilitating connections between other species while asking for nothing in return. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Human Command is broadcasting technical solutions to help all species deal with the environmental challenges. They are sharing information freely." "Solutions to what problems?" Thys asked. "Atmospheric processing, temperature regulation, resource location, equipment repair, everything we need to survive in this environment." Thys studied the data streaming across his tactical display. The humans had somehow analyzed the evaluation environment and developed comprehensive solutions for the major survival challenges. Instead of hoarding this information for competitive advantage, they were giving it away to anyone who needed it. "This makes no tactical sense," Thys muttered. "Actually, sir," his tactical analyst said quietly, "it makes perfect sense if their goal is not to win the competition." "What do you mean?" "Look at the overall situation, sir. Every species working together is more likely to survive than any species working alone. If the humans' primary objective is ensuring maximum survival for all participants, their actions are completely logical." Thys felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environmental conditions. He was beginning to understand something about human military philosophy that changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. "They are not trying to defeat us," he said slowly. "They are trying to save us." The realization was deeply disturbing. Thys had built his entire career on the principle that military excellence meant crushing enemies and achieving victory through superior force. The humans were demonstrating a completely different approach, using military capability to protect and preserve rather than destroy. As the evaluation continued, Thys watched the humans transform a competitive survival scenario into a coordinated rescue operation. Species that had been rivals hours earlier now worked together like a unified military force, guided by human expertise and enabled by human resources. "Sir," his aide reported, "we have received an offer from Captain Reed. The humans are establishing a central coordination point for all species. They want to pool resources and work together to ensure everyone completes the evaluation successfully." Thys hesitated. Accepting would mean admitting that his serpent guard could not handle the challenge alone. It would also mean acknowledging that the human approach might be superior to his own. But, as he looked at his struggling warriors and the harsh environment that was slowly defeating them despite their training and discipline, Thys realized he had no choice. "Accept their offer," he ordered reluctantly. As his forces moved toward the human coordination point, Thys wondered what other assumptions about warfare the humans were about to overturn. They had already shown that strength could take forms he had never considered. What else might he learn before this evaluation was over? Alarms screamed through the facility as real emergency lights replaced the simulation indicators. Thys felt his blood turn cold as Ambassador Krill's panicked voice echoed through the complex. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Unknown hostile forces have breached the station's outer defenses. Security teams respond immediately." The survival simulation vanished as safety protocols activated, pulling all participants back to the main facility. Through the observation windows, Thys could see explosions lighting up space as enemy ships engaged the station's defense systems. This was no longer a peaceful evaluation exercise. "Pirate raid," Captain Reed announced grimly as he studied incoming tactical data. 3 cruiser-class vessels and multiple fighter squadrons. They are targeting the civilian sections. Thys felt his warrior instincts surge to life. Finally, real combat instead of simulations and evaluations. His serpent guard would show these raiders what happened when they threatened a facility under reptilian protection. "My forces will handle this," Thys declared. "Stand aside while real warriors deal with real threats." But Reed was not listening. Instead, the human was speaking rapidly into his communication device while watching the tactical displays with intense focus. Around the facility, human soldiers were moving with sudden urgency that contrasted sharply with their previous calm behavior. "All species military representatives," Reed announced over the facility's communication system. "We need immediate coordination for civilian evacuation and defense operations. Please report to the main command center." Thys bristled at the human's presumption in taking command, but the situation was too critical for arguments about protocol. He gathered his serpent guard and headed for the command center, expecting to find chaos and confusion. Instead, he found Captain Reed calmly organizing a defense plan with mechanical efficiency that stunned every alien representative in the room. "Avian fleet units will coordinate evacuation flights from civilian areas," Reed was saying as Thys arrived. "Your mobility and navigation skills are essential for getting non-combatants to safety. Airsign coalition forces will secure the main corridors and provide heavy support where needed. Silicon collective units will reinforce critical structural points that cannot be allowed to fail." The human was assigning roles to each species based on their demonstrated strengths, turning the mixed collection of evaluation participants into a coordinated defense force. But Thys noticed something that made his scales crawl with unease. Reed's entire demeanor had changed. The polite diplomatic human from the evaluations was gone. In his place stood someone with predator's eyes and a voice that carried absolute authority. When Reed gave orders, beings twice his size obeyed without question. When he pointed to tactical displays, representatives from species that had never worked together began coordinating like veteran military units. Serpent Guard forces will take point on direct engagement with enemy boarding parties. Reed continued, turning to Thys. "Your troops' close combat capabilities and tactical discipline make you ideal for ship-to-ship fighting." This nodded automatically, then realized what had just happened. He had accepted orders from a human without even thinking about it. Something about Reed's commanding presence made resistance seem pointless and cooperation seem natural. The first wave of enemy boarders breached the station's hull within minutes. Thice led his serpent guard toward the breach points, expecting to finally show these humans how real warriors fought. But as they moved through the station's corridors, he began to see things that challenged everything he thought he knew about human military capability. Human soldiers were moving through the station like ghosts made of death. They appeared from positions that should have been impossible to reach, struck with precision that seemed to violate the laws of physics, and disappeared before enemy forces could respond. These were the same humans who had seemed so ordinary during the evaluations. How are they doing that? One of his serpent guard whispered as they watched a human soldier take down 3 heavily armed pirates with movements too fast to follow clearly. This had no answer. The humans were fighting with a speed, coordination, and lethality that made his elite warriors look clumsy by comparison. But more disturbing than their combat skills was their tactical approach. Every human action seemed designed to minimize casualties among the mixed species defense force while maximizing damage to the enemy. They took the most dangerous positions themselves, provided cover for alien allies, and coordinated their attacks to support rather than compete with other species' fighting styles. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Captain Reed is requesting immediate assistance at civilian evacuation point 7. Enemy forces have broken through the perimeter." Thice led his warriors toward the evacuation point, expecting to find a desperate battle for survival. Instead, he found Captain Reed, personally leading a small team of human soldiers against overwhelming odds to protect a group of civilian refugees that included Thice's own aide and several other reptilian staff members. Reed was not the calm diplomat from the evaluations. He was not even the efficient commander from the defense coordination. This was something else entirely. A human warrior unleashed from whatever restraints had been holding him back during the peaceful competitions. The human moved through enemy forces like a force of nature, his weapons finding targets with impossible accuracy while he coordinated the defense with tactical brilliance that impressed even Thiss. But what shocked the reptilian commander most was the risks Reed was taking to protect civilians he barely knew. "Why is he doing this?" Thiss asked his aide after they had helped secure the evacuation point. Those civilians mean nothing to him strategically. His aide, still shaking from her near-death experience, looked at Thiss with confusion. "Sir, he saved my life. He saved all our lives. Does the reason matter?" Thiss watched as Reed moved to the next crisis point, taking his soldiers into another impossible situation to protect beings from species that had mocked and dismissed humans just hours earlier. The humans' tactical communications revealed a coordination network spanning the entire station, with human forces supporting every allied unit while asking for nothing in return. This is what they have been hiding, Thice realized with growing amazement. This is what human warriors really look like when they stop holding back. The battle for the station continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt once the humans revealed their true capabilities. Enemy forces found themselves outmaneuvered, outfought, and demoralized by defenders who seemed to anticipate their every move while protecting objectives the raiders had not even known existed. As the last enemy ship retreated into space, Thice surveyed the aftermath with a mixture of admiration and deep unease. The station had been defended successfully, with minimal casualties among the mixed species force. But the cost had been paid almost entirely by human soldiers who had put themselves in harm's way to protect everyone else. "Captain Reed," Thice said, as the human coordinated cleanup operations with the same calm efficiency he had shown throughout the crisis. Reed turned to face him, and Thiss saw that the Predator's intensity was already fading, replaced by the diplomatic mask he had worn during the evaluations. "Commander Thiss, I am glad your forces came through the engagement safely." "My forces," Thiss repeated slowly. "You risked your soldiers' lives to protect mine. Why?" Reed looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because that is what we do, Commander. When fighting becomes necessary, humans protect those who cannot protect themselves, even when those beings have shown us nothing but contempt." Thice felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of warfare, strength, and what it truly meant to be a warrior. Everything he had built his career on suddenly seemed narrow and incomplete compared to what he had witnessed today. "I owe you an apology," Thys said quietly. "No," Reed replied. "You owe us your respect. There is a difference." Debris drifted past the observation windows as repair crews worked to restore the station's damaged sections. Thys stood in the reconstructed command center, staring at tactical reports that told a story he was still struggling to understand. The human casualty list was extensive: 12 wounded, 3 in critical condition, all from actions taken to protect other species during the pirate attack. In contrast, the combined casualties for all other species totaled only 4 minor injuries. The humans had deliberately absorbed the cost of victory to minimize losses among their former competitors. "Commander Thys," Captain Reed approached from behind, moving with the slight limp he had acquired during the final assault on the enemy command ship. "I understand you wanted to speak with me." Thys turned to face the human, seeing him clearly for the first time since their initial meeting. Reed looked tired and worn from the battle, but his eyes held the same calm intensity that had commanded respect from every species during the crisis. This was not the weak diplomat Thys had mocked just days earlier. "I have been studying the battle reports," Thys said slowly. "Your forces could have ended the engagement much more quickly if they had focused on military objectives instead of protecting civilians and supporting other species." "Yes," Reed agreed simply. "We could have, but you chose not to, even when it meant taking greater casualties and fighting a longer battle." "Yes." Thys struggled with concepts that challenged everything he had been taught about military doctrine. "This makes no strategic sense. Warriors exist to win victories, not to die protecting those who cannot contribute to the fight." Reed was quiet for a moment, looking out at the damaged station where mixed species crews worked together to repair the devastation. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Thys listen carefully. "Commander, what do you think we were fighting for?" The question seemed obvious. "To defeat the enemy, to protect the station, to demonstrate military superiority." "No," Reed said quietly. "We were fighting to protect lives. All lives, regardless of species. That is what human warriors do. We do not fight for conquest or glory or dominance. We fight because someone needs to be protected and we are capable of providing that protection." Thys felt his worldview shifting uncomfortably, but strength exists to be used. Military force exists to achieve victory. Military force exists to achieve peace, Reed corrected. Victory is just one tool among many, and often not the most important one. "Peace." Thys repeated the word like it was foreign to him. "You mean submission of the enemy?" "I mean an end to conflict where everyone can live safely. Sometimes that requires defeating enemies. Sometimes it requires helping them. Sometimes it requires sacrificing our own advantages to build something better for everyone." Reed gestured toward the repair operations visible through the windows. "Look at what is happening out there. Species that have never worked together are coordinating repairs, sharing resources, and planning joint security measures. That cooperation is worth more than any military victory." Thys followed Reed's gaze and saw Ursine engineers working alongside, insectoid technicians, while avian scouts coordinated with Silicon Collective structural specialists. The humans had somehow transformed a collection of competing species into a functioning alliance. "You could have demanded leadership of this cooperation," Thys observed. "Your species proved its capabilities during the crisis. The others would have accepted human authority." "Authority that is demanded is not authority that is respected," Reed replied. "True leadership comes from serving others, not commanding them." The concept was so alien to Thys's experience that he struggled to process it. In reptilian society, strength determined hierarchy and hierarchy determined everything else. But the humans had achieved influence and respect by giving up advantages rather than exploiting them. During the evaluations, Thys said carefully, "Your soldiers were holding back. Deliberately limiting their capabilities, yes. Why?" Reed turned to look directly at Thys. "Because we learned long ago that demonstrating our full military potential tends to frighten potential allies. Fear breeds resentment, and resentment breeds conflict. Better to be underestimated by enemies and trusted by friends." Thys thought about his own reactions during the evaluations. If the humans had shown their true combat capabilities from the beginning, he would have seen them as a threat to be eliminated, rather than a weakness to be exploited. His response would have been very different. "You manipulated the entire evaluation process," Thys realized. We participated honestly within the constraints we set for ourselves, Reed corrected. Everything we showed was real. We simply did not show everything we were capable of, until the pirates attacked, until lives were at stake and concealment became counterproductive. When fighting becomes necessary, humans fight with everything we have, but we prefer that fighting not become necessary. Ambassador Krill approached the two commanders, her compound eyes reflecting the repair lights outside. Captain Reed, the Galactic Council has asked me to extend formal thanks for human actions during the crisis. Your species' response saved thousands of lives. My soldiers were honored to serve, Reed replied diplomatically. The Council has also asked me to invite humanity to join the Galactic Defense Alliance, Krill continued. Your tactical capabilities and cooperative approach would be valuable additions to our military coordination. Theiss saw Reed consider the offer carefully before responding. We would need to understand the Alliance's mission and methods before making such a commitment. Humans prefer to know what we are fighting for, not just what we are fighting against. Of course, Krill agreed. I believe you would find our principles compatible with human military philosophy. After the ambassador left, Theiss remained silent for several minutes, processing everything he had learned. Finally, he spoke the words that his pride had been resisting since the crisis began. I was wrong about your species, about what makes warriors strong, about what military power should be used for. Reed nodded acknowledgement but did not gloat over the admission. Different species have different approaches to conflict. There is room for multiple perspectives. No, Theiss said firmly. There is room for perspectives that serve life and peace. Perspectives that serve only domination and conquest are luxuries the galaxy cannot afford. That is wisdom, Commander. Theiss straightened to his full height and extended one clawed hand toward Reed in the formal reptilian gesture of military respect. Captain Reed, I formally request a military alliance between our species. The Serpent Guard would be honored to serve alongside human forces in defense of those who need protection. Reed clasped the offered hand without hesitation. The honor would be ours, Commander Theiss. As they stood together looking out at the ongoing repairs, Theiss reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. He had come to the evaluation certain that he understood warfare, strength, and military virtue. The humans had shown him that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy enemies, but in the wisdom to create allies. One final question, Theiss said. During our first meeting, when I mocked your soldiers and your methods, you showed no anger. How did you maintain such restraint? Reed smiled slightly. Because anger would have prevented me from learning what I needed to know about you and your people. Understanding your perspective was more valuable than defending my pride. Theiss nodded slowly, recognizing the profound tactical thinking behind what he had mistaken for weakness. The humans had turned his own arrogance into an intelligence-gathering opportunity, learning everything they needed to know about potential allies while revealing nothing about their own true capabilities. You are frightening warriors, Theiss said with newfound respect. I am very glad you are also peaceful ones. Peace and war are not opposites, Reed replied. They are different tools for achieving the same goal, a galaxy where all beings can live safely and freely. Sometimes we use one, sometimes the other, but always in service of something greater than ourselves. As Theiss watched the mixed species crews working together to rebuild what had been damaged, he understood that he had witnessed something more significant than a military victory. He had seen the birth of a new kind of alliance, forged not through conquest or intimidation, but through sacrifice and mutual respect. The humans had not just won a battle. They had won the future.